What Really Happened with your host, Mike Rivero. The history the government hopes you never learn. Here is your host, Michael Rivero.
Hey, and aloha, America. Welcome to our show here. It is Thursday, and sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday, sure happy it's Thursday. Unfortunately, as you can tell from the sound quality, I'm having to do the show over my iPhone. We've lost our internet connectivity out here in Indiana, and it's been going up and down all day long, and I don't expect it to get much better. We are under the start of a winter storm here, so much for our mild winter, and the snow is coming down very, very, very heavily indeed. So what we're going to do is I'm going to hit the major headlines today, and then at some point down the road, Mike will switch over to a best of tape from an earlier show, and I'll just tear back into trying to get everything to work here. All right, a lot of people are still calling about, or rather complaining about Nancy Pelosi's act of tearing up Trump's speech, and it turns out she planned to do it all along. Video has surfaced of her literally practicing tearing up the speech and getting ready for her great moment. And apparently when she was on her way out of the Senate chamber, she caught the eye of some of her supporters up in the gallery and gave them a small bow. So she's very proud of what she did. Meanwhile, Newt Gingrich is saying Pelosi should be censured for her viciously partisan actions. I absolutely agree. But even more importantly than that, Nancy Pelosi may be guilty of a criminal violation of Title 18, Section 2071, which basically says anybody who is given an official U.S. government document, which I presume a signed copy of the State of the Union speech would be, and they mutilate it, conceal it, or remove it, they can be entitled for no more than 3 years or fined, and they will lose their office and be barred from holding any further office in the U.S. government. Of course, I'm not expecting that to actually happen. But Matt Gaetz has filed an ethics complaint, criminal referral request against Nancy Pelosi for tearing up that State of the Union speech. All righty then. A lot of people are starting to, joke about what Pelosi did. A lot of memes asking if Pelosi really is a deep-cover GOP operative because she's handed the GOP a major talking point to go forward with. Now, possibly as an echo of what Nancy Pelosi... Okay, hang on a second. Okay, I had another call come in. Possibly in response to Pelosi's tearing up the State of the Union, Republican Kevin McCarthy whipped up the articles of impeachment after the Senate had acquitted Trump of both articles of impeachment. So a lot of tearing up going down there in Washington, D.C. I'll bet those shards of paper are going to go for quite a pretty penny in the auctions here. All righty, getting on back to the State of the Union speech itself. Apparently, Rashida Tlaib and Ilhan Omar remained seated while one of the last surviving Tuskegee airmen was honored with a standing ovation. And I absolutely think that this was a terrible thing for them to do. This man is a World War II hero, and he deserves to be honored. And this idea of just dissing anybody who's got anything to do with Donald Trump really is out of control. All right, getting on back to the impeachment here. Trump has been acquitted, and according to Lionel, payback is going to be severe. I hope so. I hope Trump puts on those presidential brass knuckles and he goes to work on these people who've tied up this entire country for the last 2.5 years with this utter nonsense about Russiagate and P-Gate and all these other gates. It is really detracted from the national discussion of really serious issues that affect us all. And yeah, I'm ready for Trump to basically come on out and be presidential here. Now, the president is calling for Senator Mitt Romney to be expelled from the GOP after he became the first senator in U.S. history to vote to convict the president from his own party. So that was a little bit of history as well. And Romney's trying to explain why he did what he did, saying that he's a righteous man and he was, basically God was involved in all of this discussion. Now, If the Republicans regain the House this November, they plan to expunge the impeachment of President Trump from the record. It will be Orwellized. And I'm not sure how I feel about that. I think a record should be kept of the impeachment, not just of the fact of the impeachment itself, but the ridiculous circumstances under which Democrats just ramrodded this thing into the Congress and fell flat on their face. I think that needs to be remembered here. Now, Mitch McConnell is out there. As soon as the acquittal was over, he's already preparing for votes on 5 more Trump judicial nominees. And, back to business. Let's get back to business. The impeachment thing is over. Let's go back to business. Well, maybe, maybe not, because it looks like Nadler is getting ready for a second impeachment attempt. What they're going to do is they're going to bring in Bolton. They're going to have him basically repeat his allegations from his book on the floor of the House of Representatives and say, oh, those are impeachable offenses. Here are the articles of impeachment. We're going back to the Senate. We're going to do this again. What a circus this has turned into. Absolutely. Okay, getting on down to Iowa. Andrew Yang admits that the Iowa caucus catastrophe will make it tougher for American voters to trust Democrats with power. He's absolutely right. They couldn't organize a caucus. What does that say about their ability to actually run the country? And if you look at all these cities with all these problems like homelessness and drugs and poop in the street and everything, they're all run by Democrats. They're not actually able to make things work. They're just really good at standing up there and whining and crying and saying, you're not being fair if you don't let us have a share of power. He's absolutely right about that. All righty. According to Federal Election Commission records, the largest single donor to the super PAC associated with Shadow Incorporated, that was the 5-month-old company that made the Iowa vote collecting app, is billionaire hedge fund manager George Soros. And remember, Shadow Incorporated, their CEO was one of Hillary Clinton's IT people back in 2016. The Iowa Democratic Party corrects a minor mistake on the partial vote tally. Bernie Sanders' campaign blames racism. Actually, what it is, there are round-off errors that they're trying to go back and fix. But as of right now, Bernie Sanders and Pete Buttigieg are neck and neck. They're swapping places in terms of who's winning the popular vote. They're both still tied with 11 delegates each. Joe Biden is still down in 4th place with 0 delegates. And that's how they're going into New Hampshire right now. Biden, I think, is in serious, serious trouble. And, of course, a Texas congresswoman has suggested Russians were responsible for the Iowa debacle and said the Democrats have to call on the FBI to investigate. This is Representative Sheila Jackson called on the Iowa Democrats to bring the FBI in to investigate Russian hacking in the malfunctioning of the vote reporting app that threw the first vote of the 2020 election season into disarray. Oh, those evil, evil Russians. We have got to do something about them here. All right, getting on up to New Hampshire, the Granite State, that's where I spent my childhood. The latest New Hampshire poll, Bernie Sanders is in the lead, Buttigieg is in second, and Joe Biden is in collapse. So Buttigieg has definitely surged, riding his semi-victory, quasi-victory in Ohio. Now, Elizabeth Warren is making a big deal about the green agenda, about flying commercial, and she was caught flying on a private jet. And when she was caught getting off that private jet, she tried to hide behind one of her staffers, and that got caught on video as well. Oh, Liz. Okay, so the senators, Republican senators, have wasted no time launching an investigation of Joe and Hunter Biden and the Ukraine dealings. And in fact, the GOP senators have formally asked the Secret Service for records on Hunter Biden. So they're going to basically track where he went and when. All right. Alexandria occasionally has a cortex, has slammed Rush Limbaugh receiving the Presidential Medal of Freedom at the State of the Union address. A lot of people came on back and said, no, that was completely inappropriate. I disagree. Even though Rush and I don't agree on a lot of stuff, there is absolutely no question he was a trailblazer in conservative talk radio. And some of his detractors over on the liberal side were saying, well, he's got to do something to deserve that medal. He did do something. He didn't do it all at once. He did it over many, many years, but he did accomplish that breaking through of conservative talk radio, and we need more of that. So, again, the liberals are just making themselves look bad by pounding on this guy. All right, we can add another body to the dead bodies list here, and this one is Kurt Smollett. He used to work for the Hillary Clinton State Department in Cambodia as an OSAC diplomatic security agent. They just pulled his body out of the Potomac River. So it's rumored that he had information regarding child sexual abuse among the elites. All right, so let's talk about the Wuhan Coronavirus. And it's looking more and more like this is a serious situation that we have to pay attention to. Over in Wuhan, which is under a quarantine, they're running out of hospital beds for the patients. The beds are scarce, to put it delicately. And they're saying that the virus could last for up to 28 days on some surfaces. Okay, the Pentagon has added yet another military base for quarantining coronavirus evacuees. This is at Eppley Airfield in Omaha. The potential patients will be ushered to a remote and isolated aircraft parking area before being brought to the base proper. So a lot of people are taking this very, very, very seriously. All right, let's talk about the international news here. The Syrian army's offensive in Idlib deepens the rift between Russia and Turkey, and there are strains appearing in Russian-Turkish relations, particularly over the Syrian army's latest offensive against Turkish-backed jihadists in Idlib and Russia's non-agreement with Turkey's support for the Muslim Brotherhood government based in the Libyan capital of Tripoli. Now, Erdogan says that he has informed Putin that Russia must relinquish their gains in Syria, or he's joining the war on al-Qaeda's side. Erdogan has become a real loose cannon on deck ever since that failed coup d'etat against him. Meanwhile, proving that he really is the military genius that everybody says he is, he's managed to get hundreds of his troops encircled in Syria. And this was an attempt to stop the ongoing Russian-backed Syrian offensive. Erdogan ordered hundreds of additional Turkish troops to pour into Syria's al-Qaeda-held Idlib, put themselves in the way of the advancing Syrian army. The first got 7 of his troops killed when the Syrians at night mistook the Turks for Islamist rebels, and now it's resulted in all of the new troops becoming encircled. Way to go, Erdogan. Meanwhile, we're getting reports of airstrikes over Damascus. Israel is suspected. Syria's air defense systems are knocking these, they're called projectiles down, but I think we can assume that they're basically missiles. So it's really, really on here. Okay, well, it looks like the deal of the century is already dead because President Donald Trump's national security advisor is already warning Palestinians that Israeli settlements will continue to expand because of rising anti-Semitism around the world, which means more Jews must migrate to Israel and there has to be a place for them to live. So too bad, we're going to take your home away from you where your family has lived for generations and stick in these transplanted, these poor victims of anti-Semitic whatever around the world here. Another little article here, the U.S. Army is expanding stockpiles of combat equipment in Europe and the Pacific. And apparently, the pre-positioned stockpiles in the Pacific are receiving an upgrade following an upcoming U.S.-led multinational exercise with NATO allies. So they're just getting the weapons out there. getting ready for a major, major war. Okay, let's see. And yeah, who are they? Okay, let's go with Chance in West Virginia. Aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Yes, hello, Michael. Did I hear you correctly? Are they trying to inject some kind of Russian collusion in the Iowa caucus?
Yes, they are.
You know, Michael, I got a funny idea. Listen to this. I don't know if you remember the old program, The Brady Bunch, in the early 70s. There was one particular episode where the middle daughter, her name was Jan Brady. I would think it would be pretty cool if somebody made a spoof imitating Jan Brady saying, Russia, Russia, Russia. It's always Russia. I think that would be a roar. This is getting so damn silly. And for those sitting on the fence about Hillary Clinton, another dead body, it doesn't surprise me. I suggest they read Gary J. Burns' book, Crisis of Character, to refresh their memory about the wickedness of this woman. And you made another point about brass knuckles. I think Trump desperately needs to learn that when you're hit, you hit back 2 or 3 times as hard. Hopefully, he'll learn that lesson, but like you said, I don't think he will. Those are just a couple of comments I wanted to make to you.
Okay, well, they're good comments here. And by the way, it looks like our internet came on back, so we're back on the Verdo system to do the show. And I'm not sure that it's going to stay up. It could go at any time again. So thank you for the phone call, Chance. We're going to switch over to Joe in Tennessee. Aloha, Joe. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, like a lot of people, I think in your audience also, I was very saddened by what happened to Rush Limbaugh. I mean, I remember listening to Rush Limbaugh when I was, just starting out as an engineer and back in the 80s with Oliver North and all that stuff. And, I mean, Rush Limbaugh to me is kind of like the John Birch Society. It's not always right, but it's a great resource, and it brought a lot of people closer to my point of view. I mean, it's kind of like, you can't find people on air that you agree with 100%, but there's some influences in my life, and Rush Limbaugh is one of them, the John Birch Society, Pat Buchanan, Ron Paul. I mean, I put Rush Limbaugh right up there in the top, probably 5 or 6 influencers. Now, I grew apart from Rush after 9/11 and the way he was like a Bush bootlicker for a while there. But he's really done a lot. I started listening to him because Alex Jones kept putting that guy Owen Schroeder on, who I can't even stand. So I started listening to Rush again, and I was very pleasantly surprised in how he's become a populist, very much so, and a big defender of Trump, too. And at first he didn't like Trump. So I'm really sad to see him, with this horrible illness, and I think he's irreplaceable. And I think I watch, because I've been a part of these movements for a long time on the right, and I watched how we've lost so many giants, Will Cooper, William Pierce, now Rush Limbaugh. It's like, and they're irreplaceable. I mean, these people are, and I don't see any kind of like farm team, that's what's one of my big peeves with Trump is he's not spreading the manure and trying to grow new Rush Limbaughs, because once we lose Rush, we're in that, I'm sure the left is overjoyed by losing Rush Limbaugh. I mean, he would talk to 30, 40 million people a day, and he was very smart. I mean, I always liked to, like when something big would happen, I'd always say, well, I want to hear what Rush was going to say about this, because he'd always take something and analyze it in a different way than you were hearing everybody else. And it was a great resource. And, it's very sad to be losing Rush Limbaugh, and it's going to, I really...
Well, we haven't lost him yet. It's a serious situation, but he's still going to be on the air. Anyway, Joe, we got to let you go. And got to do a break for commercials and try and sort out all this tech issue, and we'll be right back.
Our show here, and once again, I'm back on the iPhone because the net here went down, and we've lost our Verdo connection. So it is frustrating, to say the least, to try and get things done. Anyway, there's this base over in Uzbekistan. It's called K2, and a lot of service people who serve there have since come down with cancer. And this retired Army Chief Warrant Officer Scott Welch has set up a Facebook page that is being flooded with new members. And they all have the same story. I served at K2. I have cancer. And apparently, the Pentagon had known from the beginning that K2, which was a former Soviet and Uzbek base, was contaminated with the radioactive processed uranium, chemical weapons remnants, and underground pools of fuels and solvents that broke through the soil in this black goo. And so for those of you thinking about going into the military, this is how you are respected and treated. This is how your health and safety are looked after by the powers that be here. Meanwhile, over in the Air Force, suicides have soared by a record 33% in 2019. The U.S. Air Force says 137 personnel across the active duty, National Guard, and Reserve died by suicide in 2019. That's a 33% increase over the previous year. And suicide is a difficult national problem without easily identifiable solutions that has the full attention of leadership. Well, obviously, there's something that's being done to these enlistees, if you will, that is driving them over the edge here. Turning to other news here, more international news here. Apparently, the Department of Justice buried allegations that Cheney's Halliburton subsidiary paid bribes for Venezuelan contracts. Now, it's interesting because the U.S. government is going after the Venezuelan side of these deals to try and prosecute them. And unfortunately, they're trying to bury the American side of the same deals, which is Halliburton's and Dick Cheney. So let's see here if we're going to get back onto... No, it doesn't look like it's going to happen. Meanwhile, over in France, the Paris streets are starting to fill up with trash because the pension strikes have hit waste collection. And there have been 10 days of blockades at the city's incineration plants. And so the streets are piling up with huge bags of trash just blocking the sidewalks. Okay. All right, let's go to Dan in Washington. Aloha, Dan. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike. Thanks for taking the call. I just had a question if you know anything about, the story in Vietnam when the troops came home, they got spit on by the, quote, hippies or whatever.
Yes.
I've always felt that might be COINTELPRO because I just wonder... They always say you got to support the troops because you don't want them to get depressed and commit suicide like Vietnam. But that theory obviously doesn't work because we've been supporting the troops with the yellow ribbons and stuff. But it just makes me think that it might have happened, but I just wonder if it was more like an FBI guy dressed as a hippie spitting in the troops so that they could say,
well,
hippies were spitting on the troops.
You're absolutely right. You're absolutely right. And as a matter of fact, I've felt the same thing about it, that it was staged by the FBI's COINTELPRO to make the anti-war movement look bad, the same as they did with that staged riot at Disneyland, the day the yippies took over Disneyland. That was an FBI COINTELPRO op.
Okay, I'm glad I'm not. That's all I had. I suspect it was. I haven't heard any proof, but it just seemed like that's how the game is played. So, all right. Well, thanks for taking the call.
All right, you got it. We're going to let you go here. Okay, let's get Steve Elkins on the phone here. Steve, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Well, the nastiness of the Democrats. There was a couple quotes here I just want to throw out there. Some of these are actors and comedians. of how nasty and mean-spirited some of these people are. Now, actor John Cryer was probably not as bad as some of them, but he said, "I hope Rush Limbaugh gets the best medical treatment and recovers quickly. And I hope that while he's doing it, he will think why poor people deserve the same." Comedian John McNulty, "It's not cool to joke about Rush Limbaugh's cancer. You might jinx it." I don't know what you think about that. These are just some very, very hateful, mean-spirited people. I got to say, any respectable person that calls himself a Democrat, if they remain a Democrat, they, I guess they fall in this category of people that we would call the deplorables.
Okay, Steve, we got to take a break for commercials. Stay on the line. I'm going to bring you back after we come back from these words from our sponsors. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. And we're still talking with Steve Elkins. And Steve, just kind of pick up where you left off.
Yeah, the John Cryer quote there is not quite as bad. For some reason, he's under the belief that Rush Limbaugh is against poor people receiving medical treatment and having their bills covered. I don't think I've ever heard Rush Limbaugh lash out at poor people. What he's attacked actually has gone after the abuse of the welfare system. I can tell you firsthand in the medical field, yes, it is abused. People come in, they get everything done for free, and they walk away not paying a bill. Taxpayers pick it up, or the hospital has to eat it, one or the other. The comedian John McNulty's comment is just totally disrespectful. If he's trying to be funny, it's not funny. As he says here, it's not cool to joke about Rush Limbaugh's cancer. You might jinx it. Like I said, anybody who's a respectable Democrat, and I think there are some Democrats that are, but your party's been hijacked by the radicals of the Democrats, and this is a very nasty group of people, mean-spirited, hateful people, and you should think about leaving that party, just become an independent, just leave this party because they are the deplorables as far as I can tell.
Well, it does seem like the Democrats are tearing themselves apart. They have been ever since 2016. And again, it all goes back to that poisonous influence coming down, from the Clinton camp, it's just really polarized the Democratic Party. It's driven them far to the left. And I think, again, I'm waiting for Super Tuesday to really tell the story. But New Hampshire, I think, is going to definitely hammer home the point that the favored Democratic candidate, Joe Biden, is being rejected by the American voters, primarily because of all the antics we've seen the Democrats and the liberals do over the last several years.
Yeah, I agree. I just theorize there could be something going on here with, Biden's been really pandering to Obama, trying to get his support, and Obama will not give support to Joe Biden. It's interesting. I mean, even saying I would put your wife in as vice president has not gained support from Barack Obama. And wife and I were talking about today, driving around. We heard the news again. I'm thinking, what is going on? So the only I can think is the reason he's not giving his support to Joe Biden is because you are correct. Hillary is going to enter the race. There's already been a deal cut established between those two. He will give his full-fledged support to Hillary Clinton when she comes back in.
Yeah, that's what I think is going to happen. Or she's angling for a vice presidential slot. But I'll tell you what would be a ticket that I would support would be Bernie Sanders with Tulsi Gabbard as his VP.
Oh, interesting. That's it for me, Mike. Have a great show.
All right, thanks an awful lot. We're going to switch over here to Miles in Maine. Aloha, welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Aloha, Michael. My commentary toward Steve would be, if there's a responsible Democrat out there, I wish they'd present themselves. Also, I was thinking, Rush, he's a neocon to his heart's content, but he's not, I don't think, nearly as harmful as Alex Jones. The way I see it, I mean, Rush has brought back AM radio, and he's really been a contributor in things other than politics, which we may not agree with his political views. I thought that might be something to think about. And then the other comment I wanted to make was, do you think by any chance that the Clinton machine, by this body being found, might be sending a hint to Bernie? Because if you can recall last election cycle, when Bernie was coming close, he suddenly got beat up and everything like that. So what's your take on this, Michael?
Yeah, it could very well be that somebody wanted the political world, to know that the assassination machine was still in good working order, or it may be that this guy was getting ready to go public with something that was incriminating of the Clintons, which is always, of course, a recipe for being suicided.
Yeah, well, last 2016, Bernie, the old guy, looked like he took it pretty good from whoever it was. I don't know if they ever caught that guy or not. I know they caught the guy that the neighbor that beat up Rand Paul, and I don't know if they ever got whoever beat up Harry Reid. But it just seems a coincidence. Right away, they have this, exhaustive kind of intertwined primary, and then this guy shows up, and Bernie just happens to win the primary.
Okay. Well, let's see. Pardon me for hemming and hawing, but I'm trying to get us back online with.
I was going to say another thing, Michael, that the Bernie and the Tulsi kind of sounds interesting, but you got to remember they're just going to stick Tulsi into a position where she has no power, no anything. So I would rather see her. I'll tell you what it'd be wild. I know it's practically impossible, but a Trump-Tulsi ticket. Because I don't think...
That's impossible because they're in opposite political parties. And long ago it was established that the president and vice president have to come from the same party.
Yeah, that would be more interesting to me than a Bernie Tulsi, because I don't think Bernie will get much traction. Plus, I think Trump needs a vice president he's going to be able to wield some influence to become the next president. And personally, I don't want that to be Pence, but I'd like to see somebody like Jim Jordan or Devin Nunes or one of these younger guys, McCarthy, come in and exercise some type of prominence. Maybe a Jordan Rand Paul ticket. I don't know. But anyway, Michael, it's always good to hear you, and it's always great to get your expertise on things and think of what's going through your mind. So thank you very much, and have a good day.
All right. Well, thank you very much for the phone call here. And right now, as far as the Democrats are concerned, we need to keep an eye on what Pete Buttigieg is doing. But at this point, it's looking like Bernie Sanders has got the same momentum he had going into 2016. He's got the same Democratic Party apparatchiks are opposed to him because of his socialist leanings. But we'll see what happens. It's a long way between here and November. Meanwhile, let's see. We have a caller in New Jersey. Aloha, caller in New Jersey. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hello, Michael. Michael, you there?
Hello. Yes, I'm here. You're on the air.
Yeah, I'm not going to release my material on Limbaugh yet. I'll give it another week. But I remember some things about him, and I think we should review his legacy. But what I wanted to bring up is about how people in our political sector, you might say, are selective about what conspiracy theories we entertain and we don't. Because I want to put forth a conspiracy theory that I think is very plausible. And this has to do with the coronavirus in China. As we know, China was to become the global manufacturing economic center It is and just the global economic superpower. It was obviously in the process of happening about this time, actually. They were on their way to have a larger gross domestic product. And just by exports versus imports, they were clearly the manufacturing center of the world.
Yes.
Now all of a sudden, along comes a flu, which seems, by the way, very race-specific. And you can't think that the Chinese would be working on a race-specific biovirus in China to attack Chinese people. Really? Can you believe that? And so I would not be surprised if, even under with Trump's knowledge or the CIA's or approval, and the CIA's doing, if they just flew over a tourist, had them go to Wuhan and release an American CIA biovirus near the research laboratories in Wuhan. And that way, when it breaks out, that would be the epicenter, and the disease would spread from there, and it would make it seem as though it's because of Chinese incompetence. Then, of course, the person who released the biovirus would just get on a plane and fly back to the United States, and nobody would really be able to track it down to that person. And so I just want the people out there to realize, when you entertain conspiracy theories, we can come up with our own, and they can be, considered. Doesn't mean it's proof. But we have to remember who is benefiting now the most from the Chinese coronavirus. And I would argue it's the United States who's benefited from it. I would also argue Israel is benefiting from it because, remember, Israel controls the United States, but they do not control China at all. And it's very difficult for them to gain access and to become powerful or control in China for them. That would take generations of intermarriage for them to move up into the Chinese hierarchy. And so I just wanted to put it out there, people. Perhaps this is an American Zionist released biovirus, race-specific, against the Chinese to knock China down a peg and then make America, therefore, great again through the extermination of Chinese. And I'd like to hear what you think.
It's entirely possible. It's entirely possible. We can't argue against it, especially given some of the sabotage, crop sabotage and so forth that was being done by the CIA down in South America. And when you look, first of all, you had that Egyptian swine flu that's decimating China's pork industry, pork exports. Now you have this Wuhan coronavirus that is just killing off a lot of Chinese people. But more than that, it's paralyzing and shutting down their manufacturing and supply chains. So,
right.
Yeah, this is a major.
Yeah, and it's going to spread throughout other Asian countries. It's going to hit Japan. Hong Kong, of course, is contiguous and part of China now, and it's affecting them now. It's going into Taiwan, and it's going to affect, it seems like racially, not to be offensive, but it's the, like the biological term, the Mongoloid race. And it seems to be affecting them. And my point is, we should just be open to entertain all thoughts. And remember America's history also, too. They say that the Spanish flu didn't come from Spain in the late 19-teens. They say it came from a base in an American Army base in Kansas, I believe it was. And that's why they were, and it was from swine. And it might have been they were working on an inoculation vaccine, and they were using pigs as the means to cultivate the vaccine. And then it gets through like the pig itself, and that's why in the 70s under Ford, we were concerned about the swine flu. And Gerald Ford actually was part of the reason he lost his presidency, is because he spent hundreds of millions on coming up with the swine flu virus. They gave experimental swine flu shots to a bunch of Americans. Some died, about 50 or so.
Yes.
And it was all because they were concerned about another flu epidemic, influenza, based on swine, based on what they thought, and the research at the time, of the Spanish flu around World War I, which killed 30 million people globally. So I just thought I'd bring that up.
Again, that vaccination program under Ford, the vaccine killed 50 times as many people as the swine flu did.
Well, it shows you how it's really difficult to try to anticipate an epidemic and come up with a vaccine in advance of an anticipated epidemic. And that's why, in a sense, the flu shots, sometimes it's hit and sometimes it's a miss. And last year was a complete debacle when it came to the flu shot.
Yeah, it was. All right.
Okay,
well, all right. Thank you. We're going to let you go here. And we're going to spend the rest of this hour talking a little bit about the economy. Apparently, the Federal Reserve is pumping another $100 billion into the debt market. They're trapped. They're absolutely trapped here. All right, we're going to take another phone call. Peter in Los Angeles, aloha. Welcome to the show. What's on your mind?
Hey, Mike, I just want to follow up on the gentleman who was just in there before postulating about the Wuhan virus. And it's a very coincidental confluence that there's that swine thing that's killed half or 2/3 of all the pigs in China. That hit them this year. There's another one. I think it's some sort of avian flu variant or something. And then there's this, and then there's the coronavirus. And I wanted to point out, a lot of people don't know this. Back during the Korean War, the North Koreans and the Chinese accused the United States of practicing biological warfare against them. And I know you're aware of it, Mike. But we denied it, but it later turned out to be true. We did practice biological warfare against them. And I just want to point out, could we do this? Yeah, could we? Could what that guy theorized happen? Yeah, we could do it. We have all the capability in the world to do it. Would we do it? Well, by the way, we're in an economic war with China right now, as you well know. I mean, we're sanctioning just about everything that they do. We've pivoted to Asia on defense posture. There's a whole lot of reasons. As a matter of fact, I sent you something that I pulled off I think it was the Air War College or something like that.
Okay, Peter, stay on the phone. I'm gonna bring you back after these. And aloha, America. Welcome back to our show here. We're talking with Peter in Los Angeles. And Peter, just pick up where you left off.
Well, I was just saying, I mean, it's no news to anybody here that we've been in a trade war. It's the yuan is replacing the dollar. The Chinese have replaced us, as the first gentleman said, as a manufacturing hub, the workshop to the world. They are challenging us for naval supremacy in the Pacific, and eventually they will get it because their shipbuilding capacity is many times what ours is. But at any rate, I said that during the Korean War, and you guys have to do some Googling and go to DuckDuckGo for this, but it's a fact that the United States practiced biological warfare. They accused us, the Koreans and the Chinese, during the Korean War of prosecuting them with biological warfare. We denied it, but it turned out that we did. So the question to ask is, could we? Could we do this? Well, yeah, of course we could. We have all the capability in the world to do it. The next question is, would we? Well, we have in the past. Who's the biggest beneficiary? That gentleman was right. It would be the United States. I want to point out something else. He was right about the gene-specific thing. Why would the Chinese have something, if indeed it is gene-specific? Nobody knows that for sure. But the people pioneering that gene-specific biological warfare are the Israelis, who, of course, want to be pure, and the only people in the world that make every effort to have their own little chosen Aryan, limit the population, and they could very well, you could see where they would want to do it. They've been trying and working on this. At least it was announced in 2008. So they've been working on it now for 12 years. So it's entirely possible that this is true. And then when you look at the other viruses that are hitting up at the same time, the agricultural, I think isn't there another one, Mike? Isn't there a third virus?
There's actually 4 that I'm aware of right now, and that includes the H1N1 and H5N1 viruses, plus the Wuhan Coronavirus, plus the Egyptian swine flu virus.
Wow. Well, I mean, what are the odds, really? And all hitting China, all at the same time, in the middle of a very big trade war for supremacy of the dollar against the yuan and our manufacturing and everything else, technological supremacy. But I want to, if I could switch gears here real quickly, you also talked about how Pompeo came out and said that there will be no let-up in the Israeli settlement of the West Bank and the occupied territories, because there's anti-Semitism, of course, they cry that all the time. And so basically, I want everybody to think this out. That's like saying that they can cry anti-Semitism, which they do all the time in the United States, and you can't even criticize them now. It's against the law to criticize them. And it's like an international eminent domain for Jews. Where they can say, you're an anti-Semite.
Peter, we're going to have to let you go. We're at the top of the hour. And again, a reminder, because of all the problems with the internet, I'm going to sign off here now, and we're going to do a best of tape for the remaining 2 hours of today's show. I'll be back live tomorrow, I hope. So have a good evening, and please stay through the show to John Stadmiller's program. And we'll be back tomorrow. Aloha, America.